The National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa has condemned the management of PATCO allegedly for mistreating workers. The union says at least 134 workers have been suspended pending a disciplinary inquiry at PATCO after they embarked on a work stoppage last year. The workers had downed tools over a dispute of a 6% wage increase. The union says they intervened and succeeded in preventing mass dismissals for over 1,000 workers. However, Numsa says despite efforts to save the jobs of workers, some are still in limbo undergoing disciplinary processes with the CCMA. The union says PATCO management changed the conditions of suspension unilaterally without consulting the union or workers. We're joined now by Numsa spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi-Majola. A very good evening to you and thank you so much for speaking to us. If you could just give us the genesis of this issue. You say at least 134 workers were suspended pending a disciplinary inquiry at PATCO after they embarked on a work stoppage. But that's because you say PATCO refused to pay the wage increase of 6% and the bonus which was due to workers. When was this agreement formed and what was the reason that the company is reneging?
Good evening and good evening to your listeners. Thank you, your viewers. Thank you for having me on your show. This issue started last year when workers were supposed to get an increase in terms of the wage agreement that had been signed in the bus passenger sector. And we had signed a wage agreement. Any employer who falls under the bus passenger sector is legally obligated to pay the increase unless they are exempted. And what happened in the case of PATCO is that they tried to apply for exemption, but the exemptions committee on 2 different occasions rejected the application for exemption because when they scrutinized their finances, they realized that this was a company that could actually afford the increases of workers, particularly because they'd gone and given themselves executive management increases. So when they took the decision to try and appeal the decision of the exemption by going to the labor court, this sparked a anger amongst workers who then just refused to work as a form of protest. And at that stage, I don't know if you remember the headlines at that time. It was around September last year. PATCO then threatened to then dismiss all 1,000 workers. So luckily, Numsa got involved in the negotiations, and we managed to ensure that majority of the workers were then reinstated, particularly because of the situation that I've just described to you. They were provoked into going on to a strike because PATCO itself as a company was frankly being greedy and selfish, you know, in the way that they were conducting themselves. So they provoked the work stoppage. But we were able to negotiate so that most workers returned. Unfortunately, about 134 are currently going through a disciplinary process through the CCMA. And it is during this process that this remaining 134 are now being victimized by PATCO management, where the company is refusing to allow them to access, decent conditions. They've been placed. They're forced to report on duty to the depot, and when they're there, they're placed in a place that is uninhabitable for human beings. They're not given access to proper toilets. They're forced to drink out of a makeshift water tanker, and we're saying that PATCO is basically trying to frustrate these workers and punish them for the action that they took last year, and this is why we are aggrieved, and we're trying to compel them to do the right thing in respect to how they treat them during this process of
So I want to go back to the issue of PATCO summarily and unilaterally, as you say, changing the conditions of suspensions. I believe that these workers are or were on paid suspension and were only attending disciplinary hearings, which you say is the norm, but you say PATCO management has now changed it without consulting the union of workers and is expecting workers to report to work despite this.
Yes, and this is another thing that we're fighting. we're saying that the decision to change the conditions of suspension were not negotiated with the union. There was no conversation that they had with us. They just decided that they should start reporting to the depot. And we've opposed it, particularly now because the conditions that workers are exposed to are so bad. And we're saying that that there's no justification for them to do what they're doing. PATCO, for example, on the 15th of December, many companies are shutting down. The case involving the disciplinary will not be taking place because CCMA is closing on the 15th of December. But PATCO still expects these workers to report to the depots, you know. So it's blatantly unfair what they're doing. There is a female worker who, during the period of the suspension, gave birth to a child, and now PATCO is refusing to pay her salary because they claim that she's on maternity leave. I mean, they are literally behaving like a law unto themselves, where they are just flouting basic standards and norms and labor law requirements with respect to how workers are treated in such situations. And this is why Numsa is saying that we are demanding that the conditions that were there before must be reinstated. Workers should only be expected to attend the disciplinary hearing, and that's it.
And this is what I'm wondering as well. As you've mentioned, the CCMA will be shut down in December. So what recourse is there for workers really, especially if they're told that they've forfeited their annual leave because they were on this work stoppage? Some are under suspension but yet are expected to come to work. So how will that work in terms of implementing labor laws from your side as a union for the workers? And, you know, if the CCMA is unable to facilitate the adherence to labor law at this point?
We really have tried, even through the CCMA, to raise this issue. And the CCMA has actually tried to engage PATCO on this for them to be fair. But because we're dealing with the suspension and not necessarily with these issues on the CCMA, there's only so much that the CCMA can do at this point. However, as a union, we've lodged a formal complaint with the Bus Passenger Council to expose the fact that PATCO is violating the collective agreement. And we've also demanded that the employees should not be forced to report to duty, but should only attend the hearings when those hearings are happening. And we've also said that if PATCO fails to respond, we've instructed our attorneys to take further action. And that would possibly mean going to launch an urgent labor court application, because we believe we actually have legal grounds to compel PATCO to do the right thing. They don't have the right to treat workers the way they're treating them. They don't have the right, certainly, to deny them decent conditions, decent access to toilets, to expose them to, this uninhabitable space, which is this abandoned workshop, which is where they're forced to sit all day. We are demanding that PATCO management must treat workers like human beings. And we know this is something that they struggle with, generally speaking. But we demand that they recognize their rights as human beings and that they respect the constitutional rights that workers have when it comes to these issues.
So what role would the Bus Passenger Council play in this regard? And secondly, have you considered approaching the Human Rights Council with regards to the inhumane conditions which you say workers are forced to work under?
Well, the Bus Passenger Council can issue a compliance notice on the grounds that PATCO is failing to comply with the terms of the collective agreement. There are conditions there about leave, for example. And as things stand right now, PATCO is denying workers their rights to actually, take leave, and they have the right to do that at this point. So if they're not going to adhere to the what was agreed to in the collective agreement, we're calling on the Bus Passenger Council to issue a compliance notice and compel them to adhere. And then we will see what action PATCO takes. But if they don't do what we expect them to do, then we will exercise all avenues. And if that means we have to reach out to the Human Rights Commission, then that's what we will also do.
So should PATCO take extreme measures of then firing workers who do not pitch up for work during the festive season because, as you say, they are on suspension, and there's also those who are entitled to annual leave, which you say the company has revoked? What would be the next step of action? I know you say you've instructed your attorneys to take the matter further, but would then this cause further complications to the process underway?
No, we don't think it will cause any further complications because we have a responsibility as a trade union to defend workers and to defend their rights. So if PATCO does take that type of radical action, we will meet them in court. That is simply what we will do. Because then we will really be within our rights to act, because they would have really gone way too far in respect of this, and we will then be able to do that. But we certainly hope that they won't. And this is why we've been, corresponding with them, trying to persuade them to do the right thing. It's interesting to note that even in their own correspondence, they do concede that the toilets that workers are exposed to are bad, because they even talk about replacing those toilets. They wouldn't replace those toilets if those toilets were good quality toilets, It shows you that they're aware of the fact that they are exposing workers to shocking conditions, which is why they feel it is necessary to change those conditions now that we as a union are complaining about how workers are being treated.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Phakamile Hlubi-Majola, spokesperson of Numsa.